everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Marketing Inc. If you are in the marketing field, I have a very special treat for you today. His name is Baer, and you should know him if you are in this industry. If you don't, this is going to be an amazing opportunity to hear from someone who has so much experience and knowledge, not only in the marketing field, but working to help businesses improve their customers' experience and their customer service, which is so important. So thank you so much for being here, Jay. We're really excited to have you.
You bet, Allie. Thanks so much for the opportunity. Hey, everybody. Nice to be here. As Allie mentioned, my name is Baer. I am a 7th generation entrepreneur. My son is a 8th generation entrepreneur. I have written 6 best-selling business books. I'm the founder of 5 small businesses. And I right now run a company called Convince and Convert, which is a consulting firm that does digital marketing and customer experience consulting, primarily for enterprise organizations. So we work with lots of big companies like Oracle and Cisco and the United Nations and Hilton and a number of other companies and universities as well. And then I spend a lot of my time, or at least I used to spend a lot of my time, traveling around the world giving speeches and presentations and things like that. And now I spend a lot of time talking to amazing people like Allie, and I have a podcast as well called Social Pros, which is all about how to use social media more effectively. Excited to be here and dive in.
That is quite a resume, I just have to say. So if you guys are wondering why you should listen to Jay, that's exactly why. He has experience working with his own small businesses, with really large corporations, and really everything in between. So today, what we're going to talk a little bit about is what Jay refers to as talk triggers. So this is something he speaks about a lot. So what would you tell someone who's never heard the term talk triggers? What is it that you're really referring to?
Allie, here's the thing. It doesn't really matter how big your organization is or what it is that you sell. The best way to grow any business is for your customers to do it for you. And I think we all know that to be true anecdotally. Like when I talk to businesses, they don't usually say, no, Jay, word of mouth isn't important to us. Everybody knows that word of mouth is important, but nobody actually behaves in their business as if it was important. Here's just how important it is. Word of mouth influences 50% of all purchases, and word of mouth influences 91% of B2B purchases. Yet, and here's the part that's staggering to me, Allie, fewer than 1% of all businesses have an actual word of mouth strategy, which is weird, right? Because you got a strategy for a bunch of other stuff. You got a sales strategy, a customer service strategy, you might have a crisis strategy, public relations strategy, social media strategy. You got a strategy for a bunch of stuff, but the one thing you don't have a strategy for is perhaps the most important thing of all, which is how do you get your customers to tell your story? And the reason why we don't have a strategy is that in almost every case, we take word of mouth for granted. We just assume, hey, here's the deal, man. If I run a good business, people will notice that and talk about it. But guess what? That's not how people behave. Like, it makes sense on paper, right? I get it. It makes sense on paper. But in the real world, virtually or face-to-face, that's not how human beings behave. Here's how I know this. I don't know everybody tuning in. I probably know some of you, but I know this for sure. None of you has ever said, hey, let me tell you about this experience I just had. It was perfectly adequate. Right? We never say that. Why? Because that's a crap story. There is no story there. It's not interesting to tell. It's not interesting to listen to. So if you don't remember anything else we talk about today, remember this. Competency does not create conversations. Now, it's important to be competent. It's important to be competent, right? You don't want to run a bad business, but competency keeps customers. It doesn't get customers. So when we talk about a talk trigger is something that you do on purpose that is designed to unlock the storytelling potential of your customers. And that's not, hey, we have a restaurant, guess what? Our food is good. Oh yeah? Every restaurant's food is good. That's not a story. That's what allows you to stay in business.
Mm-hmm. That is really, really interesting for me. So I'm the president of my BNI group. Obviously, everyone in BNI, we care about word of mouth. That is essentially part of my strategy and the strategy of those in the group. But most of those people are not ultimately my customers. You know, they're more like your sales force, the people who obviously are customers of mine that are in the group. They're going to be more inclined than anyone else to help share my story. But you're right, the average person, they just don't go around talking about things unless it's going to give them a great story to tell their friends. People are always looking for ways to make their own conversations more interesting. So interesting that you encourage businesses to create those instances. So tell us a couple of examples of
Yeah.
some of these different talk triggers.
The way we define a talk trigger in the book, and the book is called Talk Triggers, talktriggers.com is the website. There's all kinds of free information there. There's infographics, there's research, there's discussion guides, there's videos. So if you want to pick up a copy of the book, great. Encourage you to do that. There's an audiobook as well, read by myself and my co-author. But if you just go to the website, there's tons of great stuff there. The way we define it in the book is a talk trigger is an operational choice that you make in your business designed to create conversations. So I guess I'll start off, Ali, with my talk trigger. As I mentioned earlier, I do a lot of speaking, or I did a lot of speaking when we can still travel. I'm in the Professional Speaking Hall of Fame, and there's lots of great speakers out there, lots of speakers on marketing. Mm-hmm. How do I convince meeting planners, who are really my customer, not audiences, how do I convince meeting planners to remember me and talk about me to other meeting planners? Well, sure, I deliver what I think is an excellent speech, but again, that's competency. Mm-hmm. Almost every professional speaker has a great speech. That's why they're a professional speaker. My thing is I always wear plaid suits. I have 13, I think now, crazy plaid suits of all different colors, That's kind of a talk trigger, but talk triggers really need to be an experience more so than a bullet point. Jay wears plaid suits as a bullet point. How do you make it an experience so that meeting planners have a role in it and therefore want to tell the story? Here's how we do it, Ali. Somebody books me to give a presentation. 7 days before the speech, they get an email from me that says, Ali, thanks so much for hiring Jay. We can't wait to be at your event. Click here to pick out what suit he's going to wear at your event. And it's a website we built called dressjbaer.com. You go to the site, it's got all the suits lined up. You pick out what suit you want me to wear. It goes on my calendar, I pack it, and I bring it, and I wear it on stage. So now the meeting planner has a role to play in the whole suit game, which then causes them to tell stories about it, and it becomes a big talk trigger for me. It's that easy.
I love that. And getting people involved is kind of the key, I think. I mean, I'd love to hear so many other examples of these talk triggers, but I would assume that probably a good number of them involve that customer, you know, being immersed into the process somehow. So what is an example that a local business could use to develop a talk trigger like this? We really could use any type of business. Let's call it a retail store for hair products.
Sure. A couple of things to remember. There are 5 types of talk triggers, 5 categories of this. There is talkable generosity, where you give somebody something that they didn't expect. There is talkable usefulness, where you are more useful, educational than customers expect. There is talkable speed, when you are faster than customers expect. There's talkable empathy, when you are kinder than customers expect. And there's talkable attitude, when you're a little goofier, off-center than customers expect. That's what my suit thing is. It's talkable attitude. The one that you see most often in the wild, alley, is talkable generosity. And that's because it's typically the easiest one to think through how you will do it in your business, right? Mm-hmm. They bought this thing, we give them this thing plus something else, right? And that is the solution. The most famous example, perhaps, of talkable generosity, which isn't a small business, but most people will know it, is DoubleTree Hotels. So DoubleTree Hotels, famously, when you check into the hotel, you get a warm chocolate chip cookie when you check in. And they've been doing this every day for 30 years. In fact, just recently, they gave away the recipe online for the first time ever for the pandemic. So people, because they can't come to the hotel.
Yeah.
That is their talk trigger. And if you look online, there are thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of tweets and Facebook posts and Instagram posts and reviews that all mention the chocolate chip cookie. It is their talk trigger.
Mm-hmm.
Which makes a lot of sense, because the talk trigger isn't, yep, it was a hotel, yep, there was a bathroom, yep, there was a bed, right? Because that's what a hotel is, right? So it's this extra thing. So in a retail store environment, there's a few things you could do. You could potentially do attitude, but it has to be the right kind of store and the right kind of store owner.
Mm-hmm.
You could potentially do speed. Although I find that to be a little bit tricky in retail in some cases. It's a little bit better for e-commerce, maybe in a retail environment. You could do empathy with some sort of super liberal returns policy. In fact, you may know the story of LL Bean, which is a retail organization, stores and catalogs, which for more than 100 years had a no questions asked return policy, no receipt required, bring back a canoe you bought in like 1910 and they'll give you your money back, right? That's talkable empathy. They've recently discontinued that, unfortunately, but that was a really interesting policy. Generally, you would find in a retail environment either talkable usefulness or talkable generosity.
Mm-hmm.
Generosity is fairly easy. Retail store sells sweaters, and you give somebody something really interesting, different when they purchase a sweater. But usefulness is interesting too in a retail environment. So do you know the brand Warby Parker? They make, these are Warby Parker frames right here, as a matter of fact. So they are a direct-to-consumer eyeglasses company, started e-commerce. They now have a handful of boutique retail outlets. In the retail stores, most recently I saw one in Chicago, they have maps. And when you go to the store, they hand out free maps. Now, it's not a map of the streets of Chicago, because like there's a lot of places you could get that, including your phone. It is a map that they have made of the best places to read a book in Chicago. So under this park bench, or, you know, at the beach right here in this special spot, or right by the Bean, or over here by the Lincoln Park Zoo. And it's literally a map, all greater Chicago, of the best places to sit and read a book. That is super cool. Like, that's the kind of thing that people remember, they save, and they talk about it as I am talking about it to you right now. They didn't know that I wrote the book. They didn't even know I was a customer. I just got a map, and here I am telling the tale.
I love it. And so really interesting to hear you describe those 5 different ways. So as you're talking through them, all of these different things pop up in my mind of things that we've done for our clients, things that I've experienced personally. So one of them was the empathy. And I had a person that signed up for my membership site right before the pandemic kind of hit. And then she goes to cancel and sends us an email, you know, not long ago. And instead of, you know, trying to convince her to stay, I told her, I'm sorry that she's been hit financially, and I'd love to give her a free month, you know, just to extend the time that she's able to learn. The response that I got back from that was so unbelievably kind. And I didn't even think about it in the moment. I wasn't trying to use a talk trigger, but she said, I was scared to even send this email for fear of kind of, you know, the backlash that can come with you're not investing in your business and things like that. And she said, I will tell everyone about this. This is beyond generous. It was nothing to me, but to the person who was receiving it, that was something that really made an impact on her. So that's probably something that a lot of businesses may do. They have these things that they just kind of do out of habit or just out of the generosity of their heart. They're not going out of their way to create something, but it can become something that maybe you build a policy around or something that you do on a larger scale. So I thought that one was really, really cool. The usefulness is something that I have historically used for every business we've ever worked with. I love education. I think every business has a huge opportunity to educate. So for that, you know, hair retail store, doing tutorials on how to style your hair in different ways, giving people the education when they come in on, you know, this is the best product for your hair length and your hair color. Things like that, I believe, are so amazing because you can take that, use it for social content, use it for blog content, video content, as well as the talk trigger that it creates. And most businesses probably could have a great opportunity right now to come from the generosity perspective, because there are a lot of people that need help right now. And just simply donating to your local food bank right now could be a great thing. But one of the orthodontists that we're working with, they're doing a contest to give free treatment to someone in their community. It's of course great marketing. It's a talk trigger, but it is generous. The person who receives that is going to be thrilled. So just really interesting to see how all of those apply in a lot of different scenarios. So totally love it. What is your kind of personal favorite? Do you have one, or just depend on the business that you're working with?
Oh, that's a hard question. There's 30 case studies in the book, and I have another 40 or 50 since then that I baked into my podcast, Talk Triggers, and talk about on stage. And I collect new ones all the time. We have a Talk Triggers Facebook group of people who have read the book. And so I get new ones surfaced to me constantly. It would be difficult to pick a favorite, but I guess one that I would tell you, because I wrote about it not only in Talk Triggers, but in my previous book, Hug Your Haters as well, is my friend Glenn Gorab. And Glenn's an oral surgeon. You talk about orthodontist. He's an oral surgeon in Clifton, New Jersey. So he operates in the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut kind of tri-state area there. And there's something like 450 oral surgeons in his trade market. A lot of them, right? And they all do the same thing, right? They all do the same procedures. It's not like somebody's got some special, tooth removal gun. They all do the same thing, and they all charge the same for the most part, because a lot of it's insurance, and there might be a tiny bit of variety in price between one guy and the next, but typically the same. So it's really hard to differentiate in a business like that. He does it, and it has such a huge impact on his business. So he has been an oral surgeon for 34 years. Of all the 450 surgeons in that area, he is the number one rated, highest rated out of all of them on all the health grades and doctor review sites and all that stuff. Also, amongst all the folks who have been in business for at least 5 years, he's the only one who's never been sued, ever. Wow. And legal proceedings against surgeons is very, very common. Accidents happen, and it's a litigious society. Never been sued. And he told me, he's like, Jay, look, I'm not the best surgeon. It's like, I'm good. I'm actually really good, but I'm not the best. There's people better than me. And I've actually had patient outcomes that were less than ideal. But we've never gotten into that legal thing. And I think it's because of the relationship I have with my patients, and that begins at the beginning. Here's how it works, Allie. So every Friday, Glenn's office staff gives him a list of names and phone numbers. And on Saturday morning, he calls those people. And he says, "Hi, this is Glenn. I'm your oral surgeon. I understand that you're coming in to the office for the very first time next week. Before you get here, do you have any questions that I can answer?" And people are totally blown away, because many of you tuning in may have had an oral surgery procedure at some point, wisdom teeth out, or a root canal, or some other kind of extraction, whatever. And if you've got a good surgeon, they'll call you that night after, right? They'll be like, "Hey, Allie, how you doing? And how's the pain? And are you bleeding to death?" Those are like the questions that they ask you. So that's cool, but that's not a talk trigger, right? You're not going to tell a story about that. But I can promise you that you have not had a physician call you personally before you ever set foot in the office. It's just not done, but it should be done, because it is a massive talk trigger. So Glenn told me that 75%, 3 out of 4 patients, mention the call when they're in the chair. And every single day he gets new patients who call in and say, "I have to drive 11 miles out of my way. I have to pass up a bunch of other oral surgeons, but I want Dr. Gorab to be my surgeon because he called my friend Shirley before she ever even came to the office."
That's amazing.
That is amazing. Now, not only do I find it amazing, what I also find interesting about this story, Allie, is that it is so applicable to so many businesses. Yeah. So many people could do it, but nobody does. for two reasons. Sometimes we don't want to spend the time and the effort. It does take a little time, it does take a little effort. And we just figure like, yeah, it's not worth it. Why bother? And we don't care about word of mouth enough.
No, I think you're totally right. And that call is so simple at the core, but can have such a dramatic transformation. So one thing you said—
every time somebody signed up for your course, one of your membership clubs, I would call them on the phone before they log in.
Believe me, I'm having all these ideas like swirling around me right now. One example is Ken Moskowitz, Spanky, maybe you know him. So whenever I used his company for the very first time, I actually got an email with a video in it, and it had my name on a little card, and he said my name in the video. I didn't actually know him personally at that point. I reached out to him and I was like, is that automated somehow? I know there's these, little things that can do that, but you also said my name. I just need to know, is this real? He said, yeah, absolutely. My staff does something really similar. It's either daily or weekly. I can't remember what he said, but he does go out of his way to anybody who's buying, like, I don't think it's just one of the smaller ones, but like an ongoing package or anything like that. He makes a point to send them a personal video and tell them thank you and make sure they know the process. That made a huge impact on me, and I have mentioned it to several people. And that was actually the beginning of my relationship with Ken, who's now a great friend, and just such a cool thing to see. It does make a big impact on you when businesses recognize you personally, because I think we just, in so many ways, are seen as a number to these businesses that we work with. And maybe that doesn't really bother us because we're kind of used to it in some ways. But when somebody breaks that norm, it is really, really exciting. And the other thing you said that I thought was very, very interesting was that, the call after the fact, that could have been a talk trigger to the first person who ever did it, but now it's the norm. So even if it is nice, even if it is great, people expect it, so they're not necessarily going to go out of their way. So there could be things that, maybe you do feel like you're doing these things and you are going above and beyond, but if it's the industry standard, it's probably not going to have that same effect. So definitely thought that was a cool point to mention.
Yeah, it's all about expectations. You nailed it. If it's something your customers expect and anticipate, it robs it of its storytelling power by definition. So when you actually work on talk triggers creation, we won't get into the whole process here in the interest of time and granularity, but in the book and on the website, we break down the 6-step process for how to make a talk trigger. But the key to that process is two things. One, mapping your customer journey. So what are all the different touch points that you have with your customers?
Yeah.
And then at each of those touch points, you have to figure out, and this really, in best case, requires some customer interviews. What do they expect will happen? Because the talk trigger has to live in the place that they don't expect. That's what makes it a story. So I'll give you an example from my own business. We run a consulting firm. And when you have a proposal for a client, it is very, 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 very common to create a proposal, save it as a PDF, and then email the PDF. That's how it's done.
Yeah.
That's what people expect. But instead, could you not print the proposal, put it in a plastic envelope, then order a sheet cake from a local bakery or grocery store, decorate the sheet cake with the logo of the client, have the proposal in the plastic envelope placed underneath the cake, then have the cake delivered to your prospective customer so that in order to get your proposal, they have to eat a cake. Would that create a story, Allie?
Absolutely. I'm going to do that. I have a proposal I'm supposed to send today.
Go for it.
A pretty large organization, and that is like, you've probably just gotten me the job. So I'm hyped.
It'll work. Trust me, it'll work.
I would believe that. So, okay, the process is mapping your customer journey. We talked a little bit about this on Ryan Dice's episode. Obviously, he's very big into the customer value journey. If you guys have not done that process, you need to do it. It is the system that you will use to develop so many other things in your business.
I mean, local business owners all know their customer journey in their head. right? But you got to write it down because not everybody who works for you knows it. And once you write it down, you'll see things that you just kind of took for granted. So write it down. That's why it's called a customer journey map, because it is actually a map, like step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. Write it down. You'll be much better off for it.
So if you were working with a business who said, I'm a local business, I'm looking to create a great experience and a really unique talk trigger, are there any specific questions that you ask, every client kind of consistently to help jog your ideas?
Well, the first thing we do, and actually we're working on one right now for a national company, which actually operates as a series of local companies that's in the tree trimming and arborist business. And so the first thing we do is we look at everything we can get our hands on in terms of existing customer commentary. So I personally analyzed 6,000 customer surveys last week.
Wow.
Because I want to know, what do people say already? And when you do that, and then we also looked at another many hundred Google reviews, Yelp reviews, et cetera, et cetera. You want to see if patterns emerge from the primordial ooze already, right? So if there's something that customers tend to pick up on already, even with you not crafting it as a talk trigger, like, well, that's raw materials, right? That's the building blocks of making this happen. Now, the reality is a lot of times you won't find anything quite strong enough to hang your hat on, but you want to do that. You want to really know what customers are saying today. Now, in some local businesses, they don't have that kind of data, right? They don't do customer surveys, they don't keep them, they don't know, whatever. In which case, what you want to do is actually interview customers. So when we do this process for businesses, they don't have a lot of data. We try to interview 18 customers. And how we do it, Allie, is we interview 6 new customers. We interview 6 long-standing customers. And we interview 6 lost customers. And we ask them, okay, at each of these steps of the customer journey, what did you expect would happen? Because what we're trying to do is create an expectation map that lays on top of a journey map. And once we have that, then we can say, all right, of the 7 steps in the customer journey for this business, here and here are the places that are going to create the most remarkability for the customer, right? And those are the places where we want to try and launch a talk trigger. And then we go through those 5 different types of talk triggers that we talked about, and we come up with usually 12 ideas. We present those 12 ideas to the client, let them refine it a little bit based on their own preference, because you got to love it, right?
Yeah.
And if you're going to put this into practice every day, you got to love it. So we let the client react to it. And also there's some viability, right? Some like, that's a great idea, but we can't do that because whatever reason, right? Yeah. So we take the 12 ideas, we narrow it down to 4 or 5, then really flesh out the operations. Like, okay, how would we do this for real, like at scale? And then the best way to do this, Allie, is to try it, right? To say, okay, every other customer, or only customers on Wednesday, or only customers who buy hair or whatever, only these customers are going to get access to the talk trigger. And then we monitor the talkability and see if that control group, that test group, talks about it.
Study.
Essentially, it's not quite that rigorous, but almost. Yeah. And then if they are talking about it, they're like, okay, then there's a there, and then you roll it out to the whole customer base. That's the best way to do it.
So interesting. Okay, so 2 things I want everyone to remember. If you are not doing surveys or reading customer feedback or speaking with your customers for quality control after the experience, you are missing out on so much valuable data, not just for this, for so many other things. You need to know what people are saying, because a lot of times people will not write a review or post their experience online. They keep it to themselves. They'll simply never refer you to anyone, or they may actively tell people that you should not be a business they work with for sometimes very little things. When I was an in-house marketing director, I totally read every single survey that we sent out. That was something that I was really adamant about implementing. And a lot of times people don't like the information that they get back. They're kind of scared to do it. And so it prevents them from really diving into it. But if you don't know, you can't make a change. And sometimes it is perception. It may be nothing you're doing wrong. It may be education that was required to the customer that they didn't get. So you've got to implement this stuff today. And you also need to speak with those lost customers. That was the other really big point that jumped out to me. If you don't know why someone does not work with you, you will never be able to overcome the objections or the problems effectively. So make a point to do surveys, make a point to ask why people are not working with you so that you can develop a system like Jay's talking about and so many other things. So one final thing is, how do you get people to share these talk triggers on a larger scale? Obviously, online is the big platform. Word of mouth personally is going to be great. Do you do anything to really incentivize that process?
We wouldn't encourage people to incentivize a talk trigger per se.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of notes on that. One, for most businesses, 47% of your customers will, if you give them the right opportunity, tell a story or could tell a story.
Mm-hmm.
There are four types of people, four types of consumers. Two of them, which are called the experience advisors, right? Those are the people who write a lot of reviews anyway, right? They're always on Yelp and they always know the cool place to go in town, right?
The local guide.
Yeah, they just know, right? And their friends always ask them. So you got that group of people, which is about 25%. And then you have another group of people, which is 22%. I forget the name of that group right now, who also are, they're the, I can't remember what we call them. Anyway, they're the people who really like the new and different thing. They're always going like the hot new club, like the cool new thing, right? And they also, because it's new, they're also very prone to tell stories, right? So those two groups are really your talk trigger sweet spot. The other two groups, the other half of your customer base, it doesn't matter what you do. They're not going to tell their friends. Okay. Yeah. So I want to make sure everybody understands 1 out of 2 customers on average could do this. You're not going to get 90% of your customers to tell a story. Even DoubleTree Hotels, which is one of the most successful word of mouth programs in the history of business, 34% of their customers tell stories about the cookie. Okay. A third. And it's one of the most successful programs. You do not need all your customers to tell the story. You need a few. DoubleTree spends almost nothing on marketing and advertising, less than any other hotel chain, because their customers do it for them, and it's only a third of their customers. So remember that, only half your customers. So don't freak out if not everybody's mentioning it. They're not going to. Okay, that's okay. In terms of incentivizing and saying, if you share this and make it kind of turn into a referral program, et cetera, I wouldn't, and here's why. One, if you're incentivizing them, it's not truly word of mouth, right? It's word of mouth plus cash. Yeah. And two, there's actually a really interesting study came out about a year ago, which showed, it was a study of Yelp and TripAdvisor reviews. And it showed that when those reviews were incentivized in some way, the likelihood that customers would leave a review went down, not up.
Very interesting.
Because they feel like, hey man, now you're trying to buy me. Now it's a quid pro quo. Yeah. If the talk trigger works, you're not going to need to incentivize people. Now, that doesn't mean, Allie, that you never mention it yourself. Yeah. So one of the things that we talk about in the book, it's the 6th step of the process, is talk triggers amplification. And that's where you take a little bit, not a lot, a little bit of your own sales, marketing, communications, just to remind people about your talk trigger, right? Yeah. You just give them a little nudge. I'll tell you how DoubleTree does it. It's not like they've got TV commercials talking about a chocolate chip cookie. They don't do that, right? They don't advertise. But every single hotel pickup shuttle of every single DoubleTree hotel in America, the shuttle has a vinyl wrap of a chocolate chip cookie on it.
Gotcha.
Right? It's just a little nudge. It's just a little reminder. Every once in a while, they'll tweet something about it, right? You don't have to beat people over the head with it. And if you have to beat people over the head with it, you know it's not a very good talk trigger.
No, that is a great point. One thing that kind of just pops up in my mind when I think about, I guess, the amplification, that's a great word for it, is potentially creating opportunities that make it easier or more natural for someone to share. So for instance, it could be some type of photo setup where you put your face in the hole at your retail store. People historically get in those, take a picture. Where do people share their pictures right now? On social media. It just makes it a really natural thing for them. And that may not be your top trigger in general, but it could be. It could be just a fun way to get people engaged. So the final thing that I will kind of hammer into this audience is that I really have a huge group of people that I talk to that believe that word of mouth is the only type of marketing that they need. So in a lot of ways, it could be. But DoubleTree, for example, they may not spend a lot of money directly on advertising, but what they have done is invested in information and strategy within their business to create a marketing plan that doesn't require a lot of dollars to be spent. So even if you choose to make this the focus, which it should be a huge focus, you still need to have actual steps that you're going to take and not leave it up to chance and say, I really hope that people will spread the word about me, because businesses that do an amazing job, you probably see one person once in a blue moon talk about you without any type of reminder or reason to do it. And it's just the way it is. A lot of times when people have great experiences, but maybe nothing out of the ordinary, they just don't share it. So if you are one of those people who believes that word of mouth is the primary focus for your business, don't forget to make it an actual marketing strategy in and of itself, because you can clearly have a ton of success doing that if you've got these top triggers and these opportunities and these great experiences in place. So this has been so eye-opening. I love doing this show because it gives me the opportunity to really speak with so many people on a variety of topics that they're so experienced with. And I just continue to get more and more ideas that we can utilize for our clients and within my own business. So my mind is just like spinning with ideas right now. I love it.
That's fantastic to hear, Allie. I love it. It's been a lot of fun to be here.
So if you had one piece of advice for local business owners, what would you tell them?
I would tell them that, I would kind of go back to what we talked about earlier, that yes, you need to run a good business, but running a good business is not marketing. It's operations, right? And nobody's going to tell a story about you doing exactly what you are paid to do. Right. So the guy who does my landscape, right? I'm in Bloomington, Indiana, not too far from you in Louisville. And our basketball team, the Indiana Hoosiers, famously has very special warm-ups that they wear before the games. They're called the candy stripes. It's red and white vertical striped warm-up pants and jerseys. It's like it's a very famous garment here in this community, and people wear them as overalls and flags and all that. So the guy who does my landscape is a really, really talented small business owner. Anthony's won a lot of awards for entrepreneurship. He's fantastic. Read the book, loved the book. He's like, I need a talk trigger. So we brainstormed it. He's really, really good, right? He's really good at landscape and all that. But no one's going to be like, hey, guess what? I hired Anthony's guys to cut my grass. And they cut the grass. That's not a story, right? There's like, yeah, that's kind of how that works. But what we worked on, and he actually got permission from the university to do this. You'll love it, Allie. All his guys, not all his crews, have candy stripe coveralls that they wear. So when you're driving by and they're on different people's houses or commercial businesses like cutting or mowing or trimming, like, oh, who are those guys in the candy stripes? Anthony's Lawn Care. So it's just taken what you're doing now successfully and just put a little twist on it, man. Just add a little creativity and it will set you free.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing all of this with our audience. I know that there are going to be some people that put this into action and they're going to see phenomenal results. So take action, guys. Do what Jay says. He's the man. Thanks again. And we really enjoyed having you today.